And so that Garfield, is he just crazy about lasagna still?
Oh yeah.
That
Oh
was
yeah.
the funniest part about
Oh
him.
my
Yeah.
God.
A cat. Jordan, are you listening to this? The cat loves lasagna.
Yeah, what about Mondays for Garfield?
Oh yeah. We got a couple of gratuitous definitely feels like a Monday. I mean, it was so
Man.
mailed in. So mailed in.
Always has a case of the Mondays. You know?
He sure does.
Garfield, he is hilarious. That
No, he's not. Trust me. You're not going to like this movie. Chris Pratt must be real busy at home or with other things. They must have shot his voiceover in a day because
Oh, I don't think it took that long.
yeah. I could have done a better job, okay? Like for real.
Chris?
What's up? Sorry I'm late, guys. I apologize. Just on another call.
No worries. I hope it was with one of your 8,000 suppliers.
I mean, of course, who else would it be? I mean, we're
Yeah.
a lot going on, my man.
A lot going on. And I just wanted to let you know that yes, it's true. Biscuit is still on the podcast, 13 years old, never misses an episode. Biscuit, look lively. We have the largest distributor in the Pacific Northwest on the line here, one of the largest distributors in the country. So I guess I should introduce you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BeerNet Radio, the podcast where all your dreams come true. I'm sitting here with editors Jen Litz-Kirk and Jordan Driggers, and today we're joined by Columbia Distributing President CEO Chris Steffanci. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Harry. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hola.
How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Harry,
Good
I got
to
to tell
see
you, I'm used to you laying out on a couch with your laptop, dog on your lap. Like you are getting way too professional. Like you're a true podcaster now. I gotta have Joe Rogan look in his rearview mirror for you coming up.
Well, to be honest, Chris, I was setting a bad example for my other employees over here. They thought that just because I lay around on a couch that I wasn't working, and so I have to give the illusion of work.
Yeah.
You know how
So
it is.
we're fooled. We're so fooled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're doing it well. You are an illusionist for sure.
Well, Chris, I thought I'd get things rolling here. First of all, I don't know why I didn't put two and two together, but we had your brother Tom speak at our Wine and Spirit Summit back in January, and he's your brother.
He is my brother, believe it or not. Yes, I have a couple siblings in the industry.
Yeah, and he's the president of Deutsche Wines, which they sell the Josh.
They do.
It's the only wine doing anything right now. It's on fire. And he gave all the secrets of how he did that. He said since it's a small gathering that he would reveal the secrets, which he did. And I'm not going to reveal them here. You have to actually come to one of our summits. And, he put forth the idea that maybe you and he could be on stage this year or next year in January with your sister, who
we would love that. My sister is also in the wine industry. Yes, she is she's the head of one of the heads of Treasury. She runs she's the president. I think her title is president of sales or chief sales officer.
Awesome.
Okay, so the Steffanci family has kind of a little mafia thing going on here, right? I mean, what's going on here?
I got to tell you, we do. My brother started out of college with Coors. Actually, worked for Coors Brewing Company. The irony was, my brother started in beer. I started in wine with Gallo out of college, and then kind of over time we flip flopped, and he came over to the wine side, and I went more over to the beer side when I went to work for Diageo and Guinness Import Company. So it ended up becoming a family affair. My sister then started working at a Gallo distributor. She got into the wine business. So yeah, it's funny. Thanksgiving's always fun. We're fortunate enough to sell Treasury. Unfortunately, we do not have Josh, but credit to Deutsch and my brother's been an unbelievable visionary along with his entire team of really building that brand. And they, as he said on stage, they kind of took the pretentiousness out of wine. And I think that's one of the reasons it's doing really well. So,
well, I mean, before I do a podcast, I always pour an entire bottle of Josh into my Stanley cup, and that's how I get my day started every day.
Do you really need a cup that big, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, they say blood's thicker than water, but blood is not thicker than business. So, my brother's a competitor. I wish you were drinking BV or Sterling or something my sister sells. That would be more advantageous to the Columbia business.
Well, we'll be sure. Well, listen, I'm going to have my peoples call your peoples, and we'll see if we can make this happen, because I think that would be really cool.
We would love it, and I can tell you the Steffancis are all pretty entertaining, and my sister's probably the smartest and most talented of the group. So I think there's probably lots of funny stories to share for sure.
One funny story is I just watched a video of you giving a commencement speech at some college, and you handed the president just the haze, and then like you busted out some twisted tea. And I got to say, the president of that college, it looked like his heart rate's never been above like 80 or 85 in his life. And he didn't know what the smile on his face was plastered on like he did not know what was happening. It was hilarious.
He did not. That's funny you watch that. Yeah, he did not know it was coming. I debated internally of, as you know, most of my career, you know me well enough for a long time, that I am much more of a ask for forgiveness, not permission kind of guy. And so I carried that into my commencement address. And as you saw at the end, I decided, to do a toast. And so I found a way to sneak a soft-sided cooler up to the podium. I called the president up. He had no idea. Obviously, I wanted to be respectful, so I did. I offered him, we were in New Hampshire where I went to school, and right close to the home of Boston. So I thought, nothing more appropriate than having Boston beer represented with just the haze for the president, who needed to give out diplomas. As I stated, my day was officially done. I popped open a twisted tea and gave a nice toast. And then, as you probably saw, I invited all 800 graduates back to a bar that I rented out in local town of Plymouth, and several hundred showed up, and I fit the bill. So it was it was awesome though. It was really surreal for me to get that opportunity to go back to the school that I loved so much, and sharing that experience with all the graduates at 24. It was really fun.
That is so cool, and I love that you did a sampling with Boston Beer Product. I mean, you got to send that bill to Jim Cook.
To Jim, yeah.
I mean, that's
I didn't think about that. You're right. It was almost a sponsorship opportunity there. I used to be more creative than that. I didn't quite think of how to take advantage of that. But I will tell you, want to know the funny thing about the entire story is, depending on what YouTube link you go to, they actually edited my speech and cut out the toast the school
Oh,
did.
wow.
Oh.
YouTube has gotten so ridiculous. You should see the stuff they cut out for me. Basically, all of my videos get tagged in some way or another. But
funny.
Well,
you know what? Listen, it was done in a respectful way. Obviously, I did surprise the president, but I offered him a non-alcoholic, one of the best non-alcoholic beers, and they still thought it was. I think as I like to say, sometimes the academic elites who get involved don't necessarily appreciate the fact that our industry really is about celebrating great occasions. And one of the reasons I think I was on that stage is, some of the small amounts of success I had in this industry. And I was never going to let that opportunity go by to not celebrate the students in a proper way, which, Harry, as you know, we celebrate fun in this industry, and our brands and our portfolios that we all represent are around every great occasion. And so I took advantage of it. Right or wrong, I took advantage of it, and now I have somewhat of an edited speech up there somewhere. But we're trying to fix that as we speak.
We have the real link. It's okay, Chris.
Yeah, the real link. I'm glad you got to see the real one.
Kendall set us up. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, you're right. We got to celebrate. We got to celebrate these times, and we also have to sell. ABC, always be selling. And that's one thing I respect about you, Chris. You're always selling. I love it. Yeah. And which brings me to my next question, which is, it's no secret that you famously have said that beer distributors really need to redefine themselves as total beverage distributors, like Columbia has done, including wine and spirits, including non-alc, any beverage, I think you, one point we're selling dry coffee. I mean, you've got it all. And my question is that some distributors, aside from the part that non-alc and sometimes wine and spirits don't have franchise protection, so it's scary to invest behind them if they're going to get pulled. Operationally, is it a challenge? And I'm not talking about warehouse. I'm talking about in the sales. I've been told by people that it's hard for salespeople to adjust to selling different kinds of beverages? Has that been a challenge in your organization?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, I think, Harry, that's probably the biggest cultural issue that you have with, kind of transforming from a traditional beer distributor to a total beverage, distributor. And for us, it was a challenge as well. Now, the good news is we started that journey with non-alc, almost 20 years ago. But even as we got more into wine and spirits over the last 7 or 8 years, it was a bit of a challenge, right? You take people who are used to selling, Coors Light and Miller Lite and Sam Adams and Constellation, all these great brands. And now you got to put wine and spirits in a play, which is a very different sell. The strength of channels are very different. So yeah, it's definitely a big challenge. And I think one of the ways that we kind of overcame that is we really built an infrastructure that kind of supported that portfolio. So, for example, we now have a wine and spirits division. We now, several years ago, we put into place a non-alc division that truly they're specialty divisions. And certainly, I think that's hard if you don't have scale and a big enough portfolio because, quite honestly, it's a big investment up front. But the return on that investment as you start building your portfolio and getting scale is clearly there. But to your point, it is a challenge. I mean, if you're used to kind of taking Coors Light orders, day in and day out, up and down the street, now you got to go in and sell, 400 or 500 different SKUs of spirits. You have different wines. As we know, wine can be challenging, especially fine wine and white tablecloth. It really is a different sell. And, what we realized is, at the end of the day, you need specialty people who are really well educated in selling those type of products.
Just so I understand, so you have separate divisions that sell the different categories of products, but on the delivery side, it all comes on the same truck. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's what really drives our efficiency, right? So all of our warehousing is merged, all of our delivery is merged, and then we have specialty divisions in our metro areas. So think of Portland and Seattle. However, if you look at our outlying areas where you have a lot of windshield time, a lot of geography, and very few accounts, we actually do have salespeople who are selling our entire book. So they could walk in and sell Red Bull, they could sell wine, and they could sell, spirits and beer. And so, those individuals, our combo reps, we call them, in the outlying areas, are very well trained. And we spend a lot of time on education, making sure they understand, not only the categories, but also understanding where our portfolio fits into that.
Right. So what you're telling me is that beer people can sell other beverages.
They can. They absolutely can.
They can. Companies. Sure. Okay.
Yep. All right. You think about other, I use this example a lot early in our days of getting into wine and spirits. You look at big wine and spirits distributors, right? They have way more SKUs than beer distributors. They have way more complexity in their portfolio. They have way more suppliers. And, sometimes I think we find it challenging to have, 10 or 15 priorities in a given month. Kind of sounds like a lot. If you ever worked at some of the big wine and spirit distributors, they have 30 or 40 in a given month that, you got to kind of work your way through. So I think we found as we've hired people who are really good and well educated in wine and spirits from other big wine and spirit distributors, their ability to manage priorities is really incredible. And they've helped kind of educate us as a business to get better at that.
Because selling wine is different than selling beer or wine and spirits. It's amazing to me how much time they spend in the account. Just in the bars I've been to, you see the wine guy and he just lingers and you're like, dude, don't you have other accounts to make? Like you're just hanging out and that's, you kind of have to, because there's not as much branding. There's not enough pull. There's not as much pull as there is in big beer brands. And so you kind of do have to sell it.
It's true. I mean, the great thing about beer, and this is one of the things I love so much about that part of our portfolio, is there's still brand loyalty, right? There's people who still love the brands that they kind of got built up, whether it's in craft or whether it's in domestic beer. You don't find that in wine. Wine is a much tougher sell where you got to market in a really, really different way. You got to be unique. You got to be creative. Price points really matter. It is a much, much tougher sell.
Right.
Hey, Chris. So, gosh, you're in such an interesting position, particularly for this year, right? So first off, just to update us, are you guys about 100 million cases all in now, including your non-alc?
No, we're about total all in. We're about 82 million.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
And I'm curious, what is gaining share total portfolio and what's losing share?
Yeah, so for us, if I look at beer, right, it's imports continue to win the day in beer. And FMBs, right? Those are kind of the big drivers. of our portfolio. I mean, Constellation, and I know I sound like a broken record, right, with every distributor around the country, but Constellation continues to win the day. They're winning the month, they're winning the year, they're winning the decade. And they just continue to grow. I mean, we're up 9% on Constellation year to date. If you look at things like Pacifico and brands that I would still say are really underdeveloped, arguably Modelo's still underdeveloped in some regard, where you look at what the runway is. And the growth is amazing. I mean, our growth on Pacifico is now 30%, and it's sustained that level of growth. And then FMBs, right? FMBs continue to be great, full flavored, high alc. Consumers as they kind of switch categories. And again, RTDs kind of brought this whole nuance of convergence with, spirits and wine-based and malt-based. And so FMBs for us continue to do well. And honestly, we're even seeing some really good surprises. Like White Claw for us is now growing again at 4% year to date, which is great, right? I think you guys have maybe asked me this in the past. Everybody, was quick to say death of seltzers. And I was like, it's not the death. Is there an ebb and flow? Is there volatility? Sure. By the way, it's the same volatility we're going to see in RTDs, right? Spirit-based RTDs are going to go through that same brand cycle that seltzers did. And I think you're going to start seeing that with High Noon and others over time. Mm-hmm. But the brands aren't going away. In the seltzer category, from our standpoint, truly starting to make some recovery. But it's really great to see Mark Anthony brands, especially with under White Claws, really starting to grow again. So, we got a lot of positive things right now in the industry, even though, I know there's been a kind of tough couple months here and there. But overall, even our domestic share is holding, and we've gained gobs of share last year, and that's even holding as well.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll go back to that in a second. But, talking about Constellation and just the ebbs and flows that basically every segment goes through. And you mentioned the last couple of months, which I think everybody's still trying to figure out. So I know your Constellation's still really strong, as you just said, but are you seeing it decelerate a little bit? And does that give you any pause?
I mean, we're seeing it decelerate marginally. Like if you look at like last year, we're up about double digits. So we're up about 10 to 11%. Right now we're up 9. So, you could argue a little deceleration. I think the only brand that we're seeing a slightly off versus last year is Corona. Yep. And it's not off a lot, right? So Corona is still a really powerful, strong trademark. But I mean, for me, if you look at the numbers and where we'll finish the year, I still think we have a chance to hit that 10% double-digit growth again, kind of see how the summer shakes out. And, we're recycling what I would argue in the 12 years of being in the Pac Northwest was the greatest summer ever last year, which started in May and ended in September. So that'll have a big impact on us. But if anything, I look at brands like Pacifico and some of the brands that are more underdeveloped, like, Modelo, Cheladas. I mean, there's this incredible acceleration. So I got to tell you, I mean, they continue to hit on all cylinders, and we're going to continue to be bullish. We think we're going to grow that portfolio, not only volumetrically, but the amount of market share we're gaining is just unprecedented.
The law of big numbers. I mean, listen, 9% on a bigger base is still better than 10% on a smaller base.
That's right.
It's still gaining share. I think that's what sometimes people forget, that percent change is going to get lower as the brand gets bigger. So this is my Harry Statistics lesson 101. Thank you very much. I'm here all week.
This is what sharing.
That's right. And even our spirits business, Jed, is growing. I mean, we've really accelerated with Sazerac. We're now growing almost double digits. So kind of went through a little bit of the transition growing pains last year. So we're really happy with the spirits business. That wine's really been the big challenge for us, right? And just the wine industry in general is soft. But again, we have two major players with Treasury and Trinchero. And they're both innovating. I mean, they're great companies. So for us, we know it's a bit of an ebb and flow with them as well. And we'll hope to get wine back to growth, but I think wine needs some bigger industry help, quite honestly. And I think the challenge with wine is how do you figure out, how do you get younger consumers to engage in wine differently? And you mentioned it. I think my brothers figured it out with Josh. They've done a really great job, but I think wine still has a massive, important role to play with consumers. I think we just got to get younger consumers to appreciate wine again.
Did you get any interesting insights when you had those 200, that 200 strong captive audience that you were plying with beers, right? About like, you guys still drink, right? Like, or did you not really get into that with any of them?
I mean, I can tell you the group that showed up to the bar were all drinking. And by the way, it was a heavy beer crowd. It actually kind of surprised me, right? There were some seltzers flowing for sure. They had White Claw and Truly there. So that was flying. But It's New Hampshire, so northern New England, pretty heavy craft beer market.
Yeah.
A lot of craft beer being sold and a ton of Corona. So there's still a lot of. So of course I took notice of what people were drinking and what we had available over in our little section that we had carved out. But at least with the people who showed up at the bar, I didn't see any kind of lack of consumption. That's for sure. And obviously, celebrating graduation is a really good occasion.
And it's free.
Yeah. Yes. And it's free. That's huge.
That is the ultimate F word, Harry.
Yeah.
Well, let me just get one more. And I know Jordan has a lot to ask, but I think the other very obvious question is, and you kind of touched on this, Chris, being a Molson Coors wholesaler right now, right? Lapping huge gains last year, but you kind of said you're seeing those stick so far. What does that look like this year for you?
Yeah. So, again, I think there was all this angst, right, built up about what is going to, probably more in the media, quite honestly, than probably what distributors are really feeling. And, we're a little bit of a nuanced market. I think a lot of us are on the West Coast where, Molson Coors is a really big share. ABI isn't nearly as big here as it was in the Midwest. So we saw, mid-single digit growth last year. Coors Light, Miller Lite had a great run for us, and we're a small Miller Lite market. But we weren't growing 25 or 30% like some of the markets around the country. So I also think maybe that's some of the reasons why we've really seen kind of share settle in. So we gained a ton of share last year. Our 26 weeks, we still gained marginal share. And if you look at like latest 13 weeks, we're flat to declining marginally. I mean, it's literally a few basis points, which we kind of knew would happen, right? We kind of knew things would settle in, but I know when we built our plan out, we didn't panic. We didn't create this big cliff in our budget that we thought, the business would kind of fall apart. And again, I think, Molson Coors did a nice job of, trying to capture consumers and keep them. But, the other one that a lot of people haven't really talked about is you look at our portfolio, the Modelo's gains, right, that happened kind of April, May, June for us last year were massive. So I think Consolidation was a big winner in the ABI, issue that they had last year that people don't really talk about. But, for us, we're really glad that things are kind of stable. We like kind of consistency and predictability in our business, and kind of what we thought would happen is we're kind of seeing it shake out. So there's no cliff, no major fall off. I think, ABI looking at the last 4 weeks gained marginal share back in the Pac Northwest, which we totally expected. But again, it's minimal.
I've got a local question for you. I've heard from some local suppliers up there that Oregon bev alc sales might be moving a little slow since the efforts to put a punitive tax on alcohol in the state. Obviously, that tax wasn't passed, but these people have suggested that, the attention and the subsequent controversy have still kind of harmed sales. Are you seeing any of that? And are you subscribing to that idea?
No, we're not. I mean, if you look at we got off to a really great start. Even we had a really soft May. April was really good for us. But if you look at our year-to-date business, our Oregon and Washington business were both growing. I do think where you're seeing a little bit of challenge still, especially in big craft markets like Portland and Seattle, specifically in the metro areas, is the craft business is still soft, right? It's starting to come back, but still overall soft. And I think you mentioned a bigger, challenge, Jordan, which is, some of the information and honestly, it's misinformation, whether it's coming out from, the WHO or others. There's kind of, I believe there's this whole new wave of kind of neo-prohibitionists, which, before it used to be a glass of wine's great or beer in moderation is fine or a cocktail. Now it's kind of like no alcohol is good for you. And there's kind of this mantra that's coming out that really hit Oregon. And then what that played into was the tax issue, right? Which is what you referenced, where they were threatening, literally 300% tax increases. So I don't necessarily think it's stalled consumption. The good news is because the tax, trying to face those tax issues and the recommendations legislatively were so outrageous, I think it turned a lot of people off, to say, really, is this really going to be able to pass? Fortunately, it didn't. But I just think that's what we're up against. I think the attacks on the industry are only going to get more difficult. And again, it's not about, certain amount of alcohol is healthy. I think it's going to the point of no alcohol is healthy and there's a massive health detriment. So we need to do a much better job as an industry to continue to talk about, consumption, moderation, right? Which we've always talked about as an industry. But I think we need to get ahead of some of this and what we're seeing right now. And I think it's up to all of us to do that.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of piggybacking off of that, just how concerned are you with the public's current perception of alcohol?
Very, right. I'm very concerned. I think I think especially with younger consumers, right? We know Gen Z is drinking less than millennials, right? We have that data. We kind of know those consumption numbers. And listen, health and wellness is winning the day, right? People want to get more healthy. Doesn't mean they're not drinking altogether. They're just drinking differently, which, by the way, for me, ties back into the total beverage strategy, right? We're one of Athletic Brewing's largest distributors in the country. They've done an amazing job of making unbelievable liquids that, I always explain to my friends because they're like, non-alcoholic beer, why is it growing? You're a bunch of people, going to AA. And I'm like, no, it's a totally, right? The old days of a guy sitting drinking an O'Doul's at a bar that you walk into at a little pub and you're like, oh, he must be an alcoholic. I think Bill and the team at Athletic done a great job of educating consumers that, no, where Athletic plays is just on occasions, right? I have friends who will drink an 8% Bodhisattva IPA in downtown Seattle, will be at a bar, and then they'll go into drinking an Athletic brand because they just kind of want to pace themselves. And so I think the nature of the health, concerns also plays back into our industry and why your portfolio strategy really matters. Because, if in fact, there is going to be a negative impact to beer, alcohol over time, you want to make sure that, you're not losing share, to other categories that you don't have within your own portfolio. But I think the health concerns are real. I think we need to get ahead of it. And by the way, the health concerns then lead to taxation, right? Which is the way to ultimately be punitive to alcohol, right? Which is if you overtax it and you make it where consumers don't want to buy it. It's a little bit of like the old tobacco strategy, from years ago with how they implemented taxation to try to, basically get people to quit smoking. So I think it's a big concern. Again, I think it's a concern that distributors, suppliers, retailers, I think all of us need to be aligned around.
My old friend, Tom Wark, who I say old friend, he very publicly called me a tool about 10 years ago. And then we had him on the podcast like a couple of years ago. And I said, Tom, do you really think I'm a tool? He goes, yeah, you're a tool. You're an effective tool of the beer industry. And anyway, he now runs the Online Retailers Association, and somehow a source of his got a glimpse of the draft issue of the serving facts that's going to be reviewed and implemented later on this year. And the words "no safe level of alcohol" are included in at least the draft, which is what the WHO has been gunning for reasons I can't even fathom. I think reducing harm should be the focus, not reducing consumption of people who drink moderately. So I think it's a huge issue this year in particular, because if no safe level is put in that language, it just gives the states a tool to say, then we got to raise taxes, just like you said. This is a plan. This is not just a happenstance deal. This is a very highly orchestrated plan with the WHO at the top and many organizations like the Illuminati based Monavi or whatever it's called. Jordan, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Not Mondavi.
Not Mondavi. It's they sit in windowless rooms and chart how they're going to ruin the alcohol business. And I don't know how they can even fathom the lighting in those rooms, but it happens. It's happening.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it is orchestrated, right? You're right. It's not just somebody in passing or a legislator getting a big idea. I think there's a lot more behind this than most people realize. I'll give you a great example. In what Jordan mentioned, some of the Oregon challenges, they were running an ad of a father and a 6-year-old. You might have seen it. You guys might have even printed it, but an ad of a father and a 6-year-old daughter walking through a store, and the dad picks up a 6-pack of beer, and the daughter's like, "Dad, I don't want you to die." I'm paraphrasing, but basically, I don't want you to die. You shouldn't drink that. And the father puts a 6-pack of beer back, and they kind of walk away. And I was just like, oh my God. Right. And by the way, that was on television. Right. Yeah. So it is, this really is a really big risk for us long-term.
You shouldn't listen to children on anything except,
they don't know.
Kids they're naturally dumb. Biscuit's smarter than most 2-year-olds.
Well, and I guess that parlays into, Chris, how interested and or scared are you with cannabis, with D9, with these sorts of things?
Yeah, we've been down this cannabis road here in Oregon and Washington for a long time, 13, I think, right, when Colorado kind of went. And, while it's a concern for sure, like I always go back to, right, you got disposable income and you have $100 in your pocket for a weekend, you're going to decide how you want to catch a buzz, right? And so, the good news is we now have a lot of data and information over the last decade or so of kind of dealing with this. And so I would say it's crazy to say it's no concern. Certainly it is as it relates to economics and as I said, disposable income. The D9 thing's been a little wild up here in the Pac Northwest, mainly because, we had some suppliers coming in saying, no, it's legal. We can launch this. We had the states make a very firm statement that no, it's not. If you try to sell this in kind of traditional retail, you're going to have a big problem, especially because we have dispensaries, right? So you can sell D9 in dispensaries. And really kind of what I'm seeing nationally, and I think you saw this in Texas, is where there's not, where cannabis isn't legal statewide, D9 is kind of the alternative. So the states are really pushing D9. We have cannabis totally legal. You can buy it on every street corner and walk into any shop. So for us, we've kind of stayed away from it. But yeah, I mean, we're certainly still interested in understanding the opportunity, if and when cannabis becomes federally legal, the role of beverages. Obviously, you got Tilray and even Constellation, a lot of people who are into this space. So we're definitely going to be interested, as it shakes out. But right now we look at it as more of a kind of an economic disposable income challenge for alcohol. But we haven't seen any major fall off in the 10 years that that we've been selling marijuana here kind of openly. So again, I think there is some trade-off about again how consumers want to kind of manage their buzz, as I say. But we haven't seen anything that I would say was to the detriment of alcohol directly. But there's definitely give and take when it comes to the amount of dollars.
Yeah. I do wonder what it's going to be like in 5-10 years. So I was in Chicago last week accompanying my husband who covers beverages for Roth MKM. So we have synergies, and we did meet at our summit 10 years or 13 years ago. So there's a plug. But we visited a public cannabis company called Verano. They're a multi-state operator. They're one of the biggest. I think they're in 13 states. And the guy mentioned, at one point, I think it was like 2021, our market cap wasn't that far off of Molson Coors, right? And so you think of, pending legalization and other things that are going to happen. What does this whole market look like 5-10 years down the road? Like, who's bought who and what, it's just like we're seeing, worlds collide less so with Gallo and Sazerac and what they're doing with their route to market and the brands they're buying. I mean, it's going to be a completely different world in 10 years. I feel like it is, crazy.
But I also think it goes back to what we talked about, right? What role does health organizations play in those conversations? What role does taxation play? Right? When it becomes federally legal, it's almost like a whole different game on when the federal government gets involved, right? Everybody's going to want their bite at the apple. So I also think, I agree. I think consumer level, it's going to change. But I also think once, it becomes federally legal, there's going to be a ton of changes with what the perception of marijuana is today versus what it is 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And ultimately how consumers are consuming it.
Yep.
And your point about disposable income is an important one. First of all, weed has been around forever, so it's not like it just came into the market, right? There's a huge illicit market. And the other thing, Nick Modi pointed this out in his presentation. Really, online gaming is kind of the new pocketbook hitter for young guys, especially guys that are betting online with DraftKings and whatnot. That I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but we used to wring our hands about state lotteries when the lotto came into all the states, and it's true. A guy has like you said, $40 in his pocket, 20 is going to go to gas or more. Then you have to have whatever tobacco or Zins that you're eating. And what's the rest going to go to? It's either going to go to beer or betting on DraftKings on the under for some, I don't know why I'm wringing my hands, because it turned out that the state lottery didn't kill our business. It certainly hurt it when it first kind of rolled out. And then now we have DraftKings killing us, and we've got D9 on the other side coming in, although the feds, I think, are going to clamp down on that.
Yep.
Why can't we all drink beer and nothing else like the Germans did for years?
Like they still do, I think.
Yeah, that's my rant. Sorry. That wasn't a question.
You know why? Because that would make this industry so easy and boring.
I know.
Well, on the topic of threats, the last time you were on, Chris, we spent a good deal talking about Pepsi's push into distribution and, talking about how they had the resources to grind it out. Obviously, that push has been dropped. So I'm just curious, were you surprised to see them bow out rather quickly?
No, I mean, no, I wasn't. I think when they originally did the push and kind of set it up, and I think I mentioned this early on when we first spoke about it, it was about, can they get to scale, right? Because distribution is about a scale game, right? You need to put enough, product on your truck to make a stop efficient where you can actually make money. And I think that was always my big question is, could they build a big enough portfolio, right, to ultimately be able to put enough product on trucks? And for me, the big win for them long term would have been, could they merge, their CSD and non-alc portfolio with their beer portfolio, which certainly would have given them the scale. So I think once that kind of became apparent that they were going to certainly keep those separate, and the fact that Mountain Dew kind of came out and did really well early, like a lot of things kind of fell off, and they just didn't have the penetration and certainly didn't have the scale to really make too big of a splash. So I think over the last 6 to 8 months, I think a lot of us, before they announced, I think a lot of us were talking and we knew it was only a matter of time before they would get out. It's just the model doesn't work unless you have scale.
I was surprised they just didn't put it on Pepsi. I think they did put it on Pepsi trucks in some markets, but I think there are legal issues in other markets. And
there was, and I don't think they ever anticipated, Harry, to your point, I don't think they ever anticipated the legal blowback that they were going to get, and the fact that a lot of people tried to keep them out of the industry, and successfully so, and in certain states. And I think that was kind of game changing for them ultimately. But we talked a lot about traditional beer distributors moving into wine and spirits. It's the same thing in CSD, right? You're a traditional CSD distributor and you're used to pushing Pepsi or Coke, and now all of a sudden you have beer. There's still a bit of a nuance to that too, and channels of trade that are strong, how you merchandise, a bit different. Even ultimately, the route to market and how they sell, drivers sell in some versus pre-order, pre-write. I think that was all really different.
right.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you about digital orders. A lot of distributors have their homegrown systems to let accounts order through the internet to be delivered, usually former Telcel accounts, on a lot of on-premise. What do you guys utilize?
So we utilize Salesforce. So we actually just spent the last 3 years of pain is probably the nicest way to say it, of trying to implement our own system. So we now have our own system that's through Salesforce. It's slick. I mean, the tool's great. Was it worth 3 years of implementing and getting it up and running? I guess now that it's behind us, it is. So that's what we use, and it's a really slick system, right? I mean, we try to make it very Amazon-like, and there's predictive selling in there. We're actually starting to overlay some AI in there, Harry, where we can it actually takes in data from accounts, and it ultimately takes in volume, market share, things that are selling in areas that an account may not sell, and kind of can pre-build orders. So the tools are slick. I will tell you though that the conversion rate hasn't been nearly what we thought it would be. And I laugh a little bit, right? Because especially I would say in on-premise, right, where you think about people want to be able to put orders in at 2 a.m. when they're kind of closing down or leaving. We thought the conversion would be really high. It's been okay, but not nearly as good as we thought. And again, we always look at, and I say this to our sales guys, I'm like, every one of our retailers is on Amazon 3 or 4 times a day, yet they don't want to go on and literally look at it. It shows everything they ordered the week before, kind of gives them some insight, or there's something on there maybe they shouldn't have ordered or should have ordered based on local data and information. I mean, it's really slick and easy, and they still a lot of times want to see their reps. So we've gone under kind of a mentality of, we have this awesome technology when you want it, and we still have people walking into your accounts when you want the personal touch and the relationship. Because what's one of the things I love so much about this business is the relationships still really matter. And so for us, implementing, this B2B tool wasn't about, oh, we're going to gain all this efficiency, we're going to be able to cut head count. That's not the kind of mentality we went in. We went in saying, we want a tool that can offer a lot of flexibility for retailers, but we still want salespeople to go in because, people buy from people they like. And I think you lose that when you look at, kind of technology. It's important to have, but we're not quite getting the conversion we initially thought. It's coming, but it's just a lot slower.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like your service is probably too good.
But
I mean, that's why you're not getting conversions, because they like.
Supplier, did you all hear that? Did you
Yeah.
hear that, suppliers?
No, I mean if they like your salespeople coming in, that means you've done your job because
We do. And
I would say that's good news.
I think we try to offer, we try to offer great service. I think, depending on which retailer you talk to, which day, they may or may not agree with that. But yeah, I mean, this still really is a high touch business. And by the way, that's not only true at retail, it's true with our suppliers, right? I mean, relationships, I mean, that's one of the reasons I love this industry so much is relationships matter, and credibility matters, and having respect for kind of the business and who you're doing business with really matters. And I think that really shows through in all of this technology change because, again, we've seen people adopt it, but not at the rates we wanted. They still want to see a smiling salesperson walk in and, you talked about earlier, but actually taste them on products. It's kind of antiquated, but that's how it is. And by the way, when you look at the wine business, it's still really important, right? Because, you're coming in and you're talking, geographies and areas and terroir, and you really got to talk into fine wine and, they want to taste what they're going to be buying. And so, from a wine and spirit perspective, it's still very high touch.
We talked about, speaking of salespeople, that last time one of the times we talked to you, it was kind of right out of COVID and there was a huge shortage, especially of drivers. Has that abated any?
It has. Yeah. Our labor pool's gotten, I'd say over the last 12 to 18 months, gotten a lot better. So that's been a real bright spot. I mean, we've had to change our comp structure. Like I think a lot of distributors had coming out of COVID to keep the good people. And, we added a lot to wages and merch. And so it cost us a lot of money to get there. But yeah, the labor pool has definitely gotten better. It's still not perfect. We still have challenges. As you know, we ramp up in the summer and we kind of normalize coming into the fall. So even a lot of that, what I would say summer labor and merch and everything is still a little bit challenging, but we're in a much better spot than we've been in since COVID.
I have 2 unemployed sons. I'll send them out to Portland and they can.
I'd love to have them. I'll hire them on the spot. That's easy.
I'm curious because obviously you mentioned summer. How's your supply looking going into summer generally? Do you think we're going to have any issues?
No, I mean, we're good. The Rainier issue we had that apparently made public news and attention somehow, which is, kind of funny. It was a bit painful for our salespeople, but no, we're all back, obviously, with Fort Worth being back up and running. That was our big kind of Rainier issue, which is all of our PAP stuff coming out of there. No, we're good. We're good kind of across the board, beer, wine, spirits. So I don't foresee, knock on wood, I don't foresee any supply issues. By the way, I say this every summer going in, It's going to be better. And then some supplier has an issue. So hopefully maybe this year we'll be free and clear. We had Red Bull a couple of years ago that had issues. So hopefully this year we'll be free and clear going into summer. So we feel good right now.
Okay, that's good to hear. And then last one, how's that JV going with Scout in Idaho? Is that still live? Is that something you guys are again looking to recreate in other markets, or what's that like?
Yeah. So no, definitely still alive. We're growing. It's again really small business. We're growing it exponentially. Matter of fact, they just did a couple other deals to get a couple other large local craft guys in. So you're talking about a high touch model. I mean, that's really what that model is, right? It's really high touch, heavily on premise focused. We're about a year and a half in, and it's actually been really good. Like, listen, it's not nearly, the scale of any other part of our business, but really the reason we did it, one was, it was very strategic for us to kind of learn how that model works. And we are. And two is, you just mentioned it, is this something we think we can replicate in other markets? And we do. I think the things we've learned is obviously scale matters, as I continue to mention. So while we're small and Idaho obviously has, kind of different spirit laws than we have in Oregon, or specifically in Washington, where it's an open market versus a control state. But there is different percentages of alcohol that you can sell in different areas. So for us, what we're trying to figure out is how do we build that model out even just outside of beer? And again, until you have scale, NA is a little bit tough. So we're learning a lot. The good news is when you're that small, you can double the business, kind of really easily. And again, it's a small team there. They're super passionate. And, as I always say for us, it's really humbling to be the all other guy, right? It's kind of nice when you walk in the door and they're like, oh, Scout, we love you guys. You're not the big guys. You're the little guys. So, it's actually been really fun little project. And, working with Jeff Hansen and those guys has been great. And like I said, for us, a big learning opportunity. And we're trying to decide is this the exact model we could take to other markets, or do we need to kind of, continue to evolve it over time and again, make sure that we can service the channels that we're trying to get into.
Is it kind of a farm team too to learn about suppliers that you may want to bring into Washington and Oregon?
It is funny you say that. We're actually in conversations with a couple right now. Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's actually been a little bit of the leverage we've had, because people are like, oh, how are you getting brands there? And when small craft guys want to go to distribution, they're going to Scout. Part of the leverage we've been able to play, and like, this is kind of Scout run and controlled. We wanted it that way. We didn't want retailers to think it's big Columbia coming into Idaho. So the great part about it is, because of the relationship, our guys have been able to tell suppliers, hey, if we can build this in Idaho and you want to route to market in Oregon or Washington, we have that available too. So Harry, to your point, yeah, it's been really good and actually been a point of leverage for us to get, to get more suppliers than we probably would normally.
And that's just what you need, is more suppliers.
Yeah,
want more
right.
suppliers.
Yeah. Who doesn't want more suppliers?
Right. Well, the right ones are key. And there's a lot of great small suppliers that, I look back and say, man, imagine if we never took Georgetown Brewing, 20 years ago, when they were the little guy and came to us, and now they're, over 1 million cases for us and still driving growth and profitable. And, there's a lot of examples of small suppliers that if you nurture over time, the challenge is trying to pick the right ones.
Yeah. And Mike's, how big was Mike's when you guys brought it on?
Mike's was teeny. Yeah. Really small. Yeah. Now look at, they've done just an unbelievable job innovation wise and other, but they're a top 5 supplier for us.
Do you guys have that hydration thing yet, or no? That's not.
No, not yet. Not yet. We're hoping to get it right. We're obviously set up for that non-alc space really easily, but I think it's a great idea. And they got one of the most hottest athletes, right in the U.S. I love that they're going there. And we talked about this kind of convergence and us being total beverage, and you mentioned it, Jen. Suppliers are going that way, right? So it goes back to my point of, if as distributors we're not evolving, but your suppliers are, it's going to be a challenge. Like I love the fact that Gallo's, expanding and getting into other space, and Gallo's pretty cutting edge on a lot of this stuff. But Molson Coors has done it. Now Mabby's doing it. And Boston Beer's doing it. So you look at our supplier base, and I always use the joke of, and I won't mention the large supplier, but I remember 7 or 8 years ago when we really started getting into wine and spirits in a big way. I had one of our large suppliers who's now in the spirits sat me down and said, "We're very concerned taking your eye off the ball, and you should only focus on beer, and you shouldn't be getting into more non-alc, and all this other stuff is a distraction." And fast forward, and now it's a party of everybody getting into it.
Got to. Sazerac made that big jump, with their brands that seems to have worked out. It's funny because many years ago, Bill Goldring told me that he goes, wine and spirits will never mix with beer. And I think he's right. He was right, because we always really co-joined pre-sales with delivery, and they were so tied together. Even in some companies, the driver followed the pre-sale route exactly. It wasn't, they weren't routed separately. Whereas now, once you get scale, you can sell wine and spirits with a different sales force and then deliver them on the same truck. I think that is really the key of cracking that code. And I think the old thinking that you can't mix them is over. Yeah, sure, you maybe can't sell them with the same sales force always in metro markets at least, but you certainly can deliver them. And the delivery routes need to be routed separately from the pre-sale routes. They don't have to match up at all. So
yeah, agreed. And we haven't done pre-sale routes for a long, long time in our market, but you hit the nail on the head. I mean, what Sazerac did was exceptional, right? I kind of looked at, I said, listen, to make a bold move like that, there's been nothing, I believe, that's shaken up the industry that much. Maybe, at least in that space, maybe since, Diageo vertically integrated in the Southern, years and years and years ago, right? Which was a big deal. And I think it was a bold move. I think Gallo's now looked at that and said, hey, how do I take the best of all distributors, especially because the beer distributors or traditional beer distributors offer a different route to market. They offer different channel focus. Listen, I think the beer industry knows how to merchandise. We've done a lot of great things, and I think Sazerac really paved the way for traditional beer distributors to now do what we're doing, which is getting into total beverage, because Sazerac's now coming to traditional beer distributors and handing them this amazing portfolio, and basically allowing you to kind of learn, build the infrastructure you need. And our goal is now that we have Sazerac, we're now growing aggressively. We really kind of shown that we can perform at a high level with wine and spirits. Our goal now is, who else wants to come? Our doors are open. We think there's other large, potentially national spirit guys who maybe 15th or 16th in the rung of priorities and big wine and spirit distributors. And, they want a different route to market, or one that maybe has focus on different channels that they're not currently getting. And I think it's real. And I think, Gallo's play of trying to pick the best distributor in the market for the best part of their portfolio is really smart. And I think it's really visionary.
Yeah.
Who's on your short list?
Buzzballs. Well, Buzzballs just got bought by Sazerac, right? So I guess
they were bought by Sazerac for sure. Yes. Yeah. So we're hoping that's an opportunity. But yeah, I mean, and that's the other play, as even Molson Coors, right? Starting to get into buying whiskey brands, and again, it just reinforces that you got to be set up to take these brands. If not, you're going to force your big beer suppliers who are getting into spirits to have to cut a deal with your competitor, and you don't want that, right? So I think that's why I state pretty aggressively that the world's changing, and I think total beverage long term is going to be the right play to kind of keep you relevant and to continue to maintain or grow market share.
Well, Chris, we've kept you twice as long as we normally keep guests. And the reason we do that is because you're so damn entertaining and informative. And we always get triple digis on Chris's podcast. Have y'all noticed that? At least on YouTube, we get triple digis. I speak like I'm a millennial. That means triple digits, Chris. That means
I know. Listen, I'm married to millennials, so I know that jargon.
Yeah, me too.
I know you are. That's why you use that jargon.
That's right. Triple digis, folks. So make sure you hit that like button and hit that subscribe if you haven't already. Yeah, smash that like button.
You are becoming a podcast pro, dude. I love it. It's fantastic.
Well, this podcast, of course, is brought to you by Better Health. This podcast is actually brought to you by the Beer, Wine, and Spirits Summit, January 13th or somewhere. Go to beernet.com.
And apparently now, I mean, unless I'm wrong, there was a formal Steffanci invitation. So
absolutely.
If I'm not wrong, there may be 3 Steffancis on stage, which will be purely, if not anything, if you don't learn anything, it'll be purely entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so the way we do it is the beer section is the first day and a half, and the wine and spirit section is the next day. We don't know where to put the Steffancis. We don't. I mean, we're probably just put them right in the middle.
In the middle, yeah.
And anyway, it's beer, wine, and spirits, and like Chris says, everybody's getting into both. That's why we combined those conferences so that you could come to both if you wanted to, but save on flights. It's not a separate date. It's all in one place. It's a buy one get one for a little bit extra.
Well, and I got last year was the first year. Obviously, I've attended the beer one a lot. Last year was the first time I attended wine and spirits, which I will now continue to do. But it was awesome. I mean, the speakers you had, the panels were really great. I mean, super informative. And I think again, if you're even a beer distributor trying to get into wine and spirits, you can get really well educated for spending a couple days listening to a lot of smart people on stage.
Thanks for saying it. Yeah. I totally agree. If you're an Anheuser-Busch distributor, yes, Samcom is the same dates again.
Really? I thought we changed that, and then they changed it back after our story.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, you still may get some people to attend. You never know.
Yeah. It's later in the week, so you can fly up. I think it's in Nashville, maybe, and ours is in Florida. So it's an easy flight. You can make both probably. So Biscuit will be there. Biscuit, look lively. You're on camera. Okay. Well, thanks. Thank you, Chris, for being on, and thanks for listening to BeerNet Radio, and we'll catch you next time.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Take care.